Good morning. This is Saturday morning, and we're going to work on block 7A to begin with. And then Mom's got a few things, tips and things that she's wanting to put on with a couple of other blocks. But we're going to start with 7A to begin with. So I'm going to spotlight the tablet, and then Mom's going to come over and join us. Mom?
Here. I come when I'm called. Okay. We're going to start out with block 7A, and I've got to get my glasses, so hang on a minute.
Okay, this is the block that we're looking at, and I think from what she's told me, it's a complete applique block. So this is one that's got some pieces that meet here. They don't overlap. So I think a lot of what she's doing is some of the pieces that you've got in your foundation are going to be things that you use to audition and make sure that you've got all these pieces in the right place, that they turn out the way they should be. So this is the one she's going to work on. I'll put this aside. She's found her glasses, and I think we're back in business.
Okay, we're ready. To start with, let's look at the foundation itself. It's got all the markings it or should have. It's got red lines, green lines, purple lines, and blue lines. That means that the red line indicates that's the first appliques to do on this block. So you do this one and this one, this one, and this one. Before that, notice this dotted line here. Flip it over. Give me a little bit of light on this. Get rid of this. Just a little. Flip it over, and we're going to put.
And the foundation, you can read the things through it, but the foundation, the printed side is actually down.
Printed side's actually down, so everything's going the wrong way. You're not for reading. Okay, then you match the first square up with that dotted line as close as you can. Not rocket science. It doesn't have to be on the line, but close. And it goes there, and you glue that. Now, when I glue it, I put a little bit of glue here. Well, I put a glue out here to hold this piece in place.
You hold your corners down.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And then I stitch on the red lines.
Now, since this one has 4 different colors, that means you're doing your applique in 4 different steps.
4 different steps.
One color at a time.
Right. And this one, because it has an applique over the top of it, is considered a partial inseam, partial turned edge applique.
Okay.
This one, which is going to be this, it'll be in here, the green line. It's going to be the same thing, partial turned edge, but it's a reverse applique. So it's a turned edge, but it's reverse applique.
Okay.
That's for this one.
Let's start where we're at. How do we do the start part?
To start out with,
you got your piece lined up, and you've matched up this,
right,
the fabric to this dashed line. Now what do you do?
Then I stitch on all the red lines.
Okay, so you do your placement line then.
Yeah.
Okay.
So then the next step is to put the appliques on. And I've cheated and got this done ahead of time.
Okay.
This is 1, this was 2, this was 3. Now, and I haven't trimmed this out. And I stitched here. I trimmed out behind the colored behind here because I don't want it showing through.
You trimmed that out as you did it.
As I did it.
Okay, so this is what you're going to do with this one, is the same thing you did with all of these.
Mm-hmm.
You're just going to do this one to show us.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So I'm going, and I marked a red line around here with a friction pen because I want to be pretty close. I want to get rid of enough of this so it doesn't peek out and show behind the other applique.
You want your dark colored fabric to be out of there so it doesn't peek out behind.
And I'm going to loosen that. Now I'm going to trim on the red line because eyeballing it's fine, but sometimes the marked line is even better.
Okay.
and that's a discard. Or if you want to throw it in the scrap bin, that's fine with me. There, that's ready. Put it off to the side. Now, I left one of these that I had not done, and this is where I'm going to show you something different. I've got a picture tutorial. I'm preparing one on how I did this or what I did, but it was one of those what if days. What am I going to get? What if I do this? What'll I get? So I tried it, and I've got my glue stick, and of course you notice I put the applique pattern onto the fabric. I trimmed on all of the lines, and I left the red line. I glued the pattern to the fabric. Didn't trim this, didn't need to, but I did trim this, and I left a really wide turn under. I'm going to take the glue stick, and I'm going to put a little bit of glue there. I'm going to run it around here.
You're staying on the foundation.
On the foundation. Remember we said, now back here, I want a little dab here and a little dab here. This eliminates the water and the moisture that sometimes gets us in trouble by causing this to edge fold back.
So this is just another way.
It's an alternative.
It's an alternative to folding the foundation and doing the turned edge without having to do the folding pin with a little bit of liquid.
Right.
Okay.
And that little tiny bit of glue is going to hold it right there.
Okay.
And I'll just work around. I don't have to use the iron. I don't have to use water. And I am happy with the curved edge.
Okay.
Piece of cake, right?
Now,
okay.
The reason that you left that seam allowance a little wider on there was why?
Because I want it to completely cover what's left here.
Okay.
Now, they shouldn't overlap. Well, they should just come together. And on the back side, this is my guide. I'm going to stick a pin through right there at that point, and I'm going to aim it to the center. I'm going to do the same thing over here. Aim it to the center.
And these are for guides.
These are just for a guide.
Okay.
So I don't want this applique edge to go beyond these 2 points.
They need to meet, but they do not need to overlap.
Now they're going to overlap out here. That's fine. It can be covered up. You'll never see it.
But where the pins are,
It's where they meet.
That's where they meet.
Yeah.
So they can overlap outside where the pins are, but not inside.
Right. And we're doing that to get it to look like Jane's block.
Okay.
That's the reason. Okay, now I don't have it. You can see the pin right there. And the other pin is right there. So I'm happy with where it is. Now I'm going to pull this back, and I'm going to hold it, but I'm going to hold it in place, and I'm going to put a little bit of glue right there. And then I'm going to stick that to the foundation.
Okay.
Okay. Now, my next thing is, I'm doing this by hand applique. I did it this way because I wanted to know if the glue in any way made it difficult to hand applique a piece of fabric. And I found that it does not. So I'm going to start back here. And I don't have a thimble, so I hope I don't puncture myself. And it works well. Now, since you didn't put glue in this area, oh, thank you. Since you didn't put glue under this area, you should be able to just slip the needle into the fabric and come up. And that's what we're doing.
You're just slipping from...
I'm slipping the needle into the fabric, between the fabric and the foundation. Well, I didn't do a very good job there.
Okay, so you went through that. Okay.
I went
so
through
the idea is to put it through just the colored fabric, not
Yeah.
the foundation, and then come up in the fold and just do your needle turn applique with that.
And for me, it works better if I hold the needle pretty much horizontal right on top of the fabric, the colored fabric, and it'll slip through easier. Don't stab down, just kind of lay it and slip it in there.
Okay. So then that's how you, then so then
That's
the
how
glue,
I do it.
okay, so the glue in there, the washable glue did not hamper the hand applique.
That's right.
Okay.
And that's how I do it. I'm going to do that later. We don't want to sit and watch me do hand applique because it's a slow process.
Okay.
But that's the point.
Okay.
Now, I hand appliqued this one and I hand appliqued this one. This one I already took the pattern out of, so I'm going to do the same thing with here. And it was glued pretty good, so it's going to want to stay. There it is, gone.
Okay, so you're taking the pattern out just like you
Taking the
normally
pattern
do.
out, just like you normally do.
Okay.
And this one, take the pattern out. And I do, if you think the pattern is going to stick, take a tool that's kind of blunt on the end and run it around and loosen the glue that held those little clips down. That'll help it come out better. And there it is.
Okay.
Then I'll go and press them.
Okay.
So that's that one. Now, when you press, you need to press this to flatten it out. But notice that your pieces will overlap out here. That's okay. You're going to sew it down anyway. The next thing we're going to do, and I didn't do it, is stitch on the green lines. And when that's done, I'll come back and trim away whatever I want to outside, just like on regular
Trim away the
applique.
extra.
Right.
Okay.
Now then, the next step, let me press this one down because it wants to stand up and wave at us. Okay, for purposes of this demonstration, I'm going to go and stitch on the green line around here because I can,
Okay, so we're now onto the second applique.
even
So
though
what-
I haven't finished the first one, but
Right.
that's okay.
So we're gonna do stitching on the green line for the second applique and get that placement line.
And it would probably help if I had the needle threaded, don't you think?
Well, I had grandkids here this past week. And because we got a new grandbaby. And so I had a couple of the older siblings here, and I think they got into the machine. Either that or the dog did. I'm not sure which one. But anyway, I found a thread nest this morning. Was not bad. And then I didn't check to see that the needle been unthreaded yet.
This doesn't sound good. And I can see why. Now it should be better.
Okay.
We'll start this one over.
I'm still trying, I'm still finding things that are not quite where they ought to be. But that's okay. Mama and baby are doing fine. We had a grand time with grandkids. I was worn out, but it was good.
Okay, get that out of the way. We'll try this once more.
This is just a straight line on the green line.
Yeah, just sewing straight on the green line. And I stop and pick my needle up. The green line does not cross over. It could, but you know, you're gonna put an applique over it.
Okay, so we're doing the second layer of placement. This, in all of the blocks that are in Mrs. Stickle's sampler, we found that there are only 4 layers of applique required. This block takes all 4 of them. So you're going to have all the 4 different colors: the red, green, purple,
and blue.
and blue. So this is one of the few that will take all 4 of them, and you do them in the order that that you come to them. And this is part of what's in the applique directions. It gives you this information. Most of them will have a red or a red and a green. Very few will have more than that.
Okay, now I've stitched around here. I'm going to do this after I finish up this applique. I'll complete this, but for all intents and purposes now, we'll do it this way. So I'm going to start here, and I'm going to trim outside this line.
And you're trimming just the background colored fabric.
I am, but I'm going to go back and get that little tail.
Okay.
We don't need him. Not
Okay.
anymore.
Okay. Everything's been held in place so the tail can go.
Right.
All right. And this is a pretty thin seam allowance that you're cutting in there.
Mm-hmm. And it's not going to make a whole lot of difference because a colored fabric goes on top of it. So there's not going to be anything show through.
Okay.
Okay, that's good enough for right now. Okay, now the next thing I want to do is take this pattern, which is the next applique. And I've already cut it out and I've left the green line. I left the colored lines on all of these pieces. First off, I want to match the lines out here. Now, the next place I want to look is, am I happy with where these points fall here and here and here and here? And if I'm happy with it, then the next thing I'm going to do is glue this fabric to this pattern to this fabric, and it matches it. It's going to fit here.
We just have you cut the fabric the right size for that
Right,
piece.
right.
But you use the piece of foundation to make sure that you're not bigger or smaller. Make sure that when you put this on, it's going to be in the right place. Okay, here again, she's using the glue instead of the water and the fabric folding pen. It's just an option. You use whatever works for you.
Now, I want this to stay here. I don't want it to take off. And I'm going to put a little dab of glue in the corners just to kind of keep it together.
Now, you'll notice that we're putting glue only on the foundation. When you put glue on the foundation and you take your foundation out, that foundation will take the glue out with it. You will have very little, if any, stay on the fabric. Now, if you press it first, you might have a little transfer, but as a general rule, you will not have any transfer to your fabric. So we always put the glue on the foundation just for that reason.
Okay, now I'm happy with where this is here. I'm going to make a little clip here. Fold it in half, make a little clip. Now that I'm going to eyeball it.
Okay, you're clipping out the
I'm
center
clipping
piece.
out the center because the instructions say to remove and discard. So
we remove and discard the center of the foundation. We also remove and discard the center of the piece of fabric. We don't need it.
But remember, you got to have your turn under allowance.
Right. Okay.
Okay, save that little piece. It's probably going to come in handy later on. Okay, now we've kind of got a corner here, so let's clip into that one. Almost to the corner, not quite.
Leaving a thread or two.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now I got to pick this thing up. I can cut it easier when I do this. And the same process. You clip your curves. Gets kind of boring. That's as far as I'm going to clip. Now we're going to go back to the glue. And this time it goes on this. Right there. Now that's nice and neat.
Okay.
I'm happy with the curve, and I'll continue on clipping until I get it clipped. Then I'll bring it over here, and you can see this is where it's going to go, right there.
Okay.
And this looks odd because I haven't turned it under, but that's the way that one will look. You put it on here, get it set, and here again, the placement is, you got clean lines to place it by.
And if you need to wiggle it just a flicker,
You
you
can,
can do that. These lining it up with the outside edges here is a start.
but you really want it to be, you want to be happy with it right here. And so far, I'm happy with it right here.
Okay.
Then I will applique this, and I'll probably do it. I've decided I'm going to do this one all by hand. That done, after that's on, go back and stitch the purple lines, which I'm not going to do now because I can't. And this is the pattern.
The same thing that you did before.
Same thing. Now, this time you match up these outside cut lines with this outer line of the block itself. Okay. Am I happy with how it's going to look? And yes, I'm happy.
So what you would be looking at is this corner
Right
right
here.
here and this one here to make sure that your lines either
And
don't.
if it's not exactly right, you want to try to get these little peaks right at that little corner.
Okay, let's look at this one and show
Yeah.
what we're looking at.
You want this here is what we're talking about. You want, I'm sorry, this one is what you're talking about, and it's the white. You want this little peak to be right here, right here, here, and here.
Okay.
And if it is really close, good to go. You're ready to put this applique on. That's the white one. Now, I'm going to back up a little bit. After you get this piece appliqued on, don't forget to take out this pattern. You take it out of there, this piece right here.
Before you stitch
Before you stitch anything else, before you do this purple line stitching.
don't put placement lines on there before you take that out. Take the foundation.
Take the foundation pattern, take this foundation, this piece, take it out after you've got this appliqued on here.
But before you do the placement lines for the purple.
Right.
Okay.
And then you do the placement lines for the purple.
Okay.
Which is going to go on this piece of fabric. And we've been over applique before. I think if you all would like, let me know. If you'd like a picture tutorial on this, I can put one up. If not, then we'll just kind of carry on. Okay, jumping ahead back to this one. You'll glue this onto here like I did this one, and cut out and clip and turn. And then the next thing would be to put it on here.
You're just laying layers over the top and you're clipping the center, which is more or less a reverse applique.
It is. That's a reverse applique.
Okay.
Then you applique this piece onto this around here. When that applique, and that's this piece here.
And you're putting this on here. And that gets all of your block. Everything's covered on your block. All your pieces are now covering your base foundation.
Right. Then the last thing you do is you stitch on the blue lines. And these appliques are a true turned edge closed shape applique. They go on the top. They're the last thing to go on. And I've got these glued on, but I don't have them trimmed because I think everybody kind of understands how this is supposed to work.
So then these are basically appliqued on over the top, just like the normal applique that we're used to seeing.
The last thing to go on this block. And when that's done, it's done.
And your placement is because using these placement lines that you've got here.
And also you stitch these blue lines, but when you go to put this down, put the point of that shape right there, whether it's perfect on the back or not. That little point should be right here. Okay. According to, well,
according to the picture. Yeah. Okay.
So basically that's the only block that I came up with that really needed, I felt, to be explained.
Does what this is, does it make sense? Does the process going through? Okay. Any other questions on this block? No. Okay. We'll continue on. She's got a couple of other blocks that she wants to talk about, and I think we may have a little shorter session this time. That was the biggest one.
Okay, the next block,
I've got 7C and it's a pink one.
that's this one.
Okay.
This foundation is pretty straightforward. And your foundation doesn't look like mine because I had limitations when I made them, and Laura's worked them over so it's easier for you. But notice that we've got 4 pieces, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and they each one have a red line on them.
Here's one, and there's your,
that's this one.
they're each 4 pieces here.
Right.
Okay.
And this one is 2 because remember it's flipped over.
Okay.
Okay. The first thing you do is put your white fabric or your background fabric onto the reverse side of this piece. Just glue it on. And I like to put a line of glue like right along here. Then go and stitch the red line. Next step, trim. So you have no fabric behind here at all. You have just foundation. Then you prepare your pieces and cut them out on the outer lines. I left the red because it didn't matter if this was a hair bigger or not. The main thing is I want them to match up when these two get sewed together, which is here and here, and these places. So this one is pretty straightforward. This is a partial turned edge, partial inseam applique. And when you get these prepared, then you match this edge here. That will be a clean cut edge. You'll match this edge to right here.
So that's your lining it up, and that's your placement then.
Then applique, sew the applique down, whether you do it by hand or machine, doesn't matter. And you do all of them that way. Then when you're done with that, put it together, follow the numbers. There's 1, 2, and 3, and I press the seams toward in a clockwise motion like this. Then when you press it, you've got this little tiny square here, which takes away a lot of the bulk.
And you've got the foundation taken out of the seam allowance. You left it every place else, but you took it out of the seam allowance. That way it pressed much easier.
It pressed much easier.
So it pretty well lays flat at that point. So that's
that block.
That's that one. So.
Not a hard block, but just a couple things to think about.
Okay.
Now the next one on this one, it's just straight sewing.
Okay.
But when you piece these.
Let's look at this here.
Let's look at this one here. Okay. I don't know if you can see the seam allowances through here. There's a seam allowance here and one here and one here. You can kind of see the seam allowances through the foundation or through the fabric. Okay. To piece it, make it easy to piece. Of course, I trim all these out and leave the extra around them. But when I sew this piece, when I piece this little unit, I sew all the way through from side to side. I don't even have to backstitch. I'm sewing all the way through from here to here on this one, and on these. Not here, but sew through the seam allowance here, through the seam allowances on these. The reason being, these are really little pieces, and if you don't sew that seam allowance, sew it all the way out to the cut edge, it's harder to piece it onto the foundation, because with the foundation, you start with this piece right here, which is unit 1. Then you put this foundation, which is number 1, onto here. And if you have the seam, if you have the stitching go out to here and the stitching go out into the seam line, to the seam allowance, it just makes it easier to line up. And these are planned so that the seams will abut, they won't stack up on top of each other. So that's the method behind the whole thing. In fact, this would be here, and add this and this. Then you'll piece this, add this, which is here, then add this one, then add this one. And
It's-
then these are kind of, you just have to put these together. There's no other way to do that one.
So really, basically, it's going out to the edges of the seam allowances simply because the pieces are so small.
Mhm.
It just gives an extra stability in putting them together.
That's
Okay.
that's the method behind it. That's why I did it that way.
So then the directions probably tell us to go through into the seam allowances.
They
at that-
should, and if they don't, well, we need to make note of it.
Yeah, I think they do in that one.
Yeah.
So basically, that's what you're looking at. It's a simple block, but yet there's a few tips and techniques that make it a whole lot easier.
Mhm.
So
I think that's all, unless there are questions about anything.
nothing,
Okay.
nothing there. Okay.
You said it right, huh?
Okay. Well, in that case, then I think we've got, this is the row 6 at the
Row
or
7.
row 7. Sorry, row 7, part of row 7. And I think if that's the case, then I think we're probably going to stop and